Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. Today I have Mike Manrod, not a doctor yet, CISO of Grand Canyon University and Grand Canyon Education. Correct me if I'm wrong, sir.
No, that's spot on, Chad. Thank you so much. And thanks for inviting me to be here. It's an honor.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate it. If you would mind taking a few minutes to give us kind of your background and your bio of what you do and what you're responsible for, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. So my responsibilities are obviously leading the security program on the corporate security side for Grand Canyon Education and GCU as well by proxy, and obviously collaborate with everybody I can on the academic side. And that's how I had the pleasure of obviously getting to know you, Chet. So that's really where my passion is, when it's not just keeping the bad guys at bay, right? And the journey has been a long one. Like, I was a Navy veteran, a corpsman. So lots of people assume that was cyber. No, I was like patching up wounds and, taking care of, scrubbing out injuries, not doing cyber in the Navy. But after a long and winding journey, somebody invited me to DEF CON about 10, 12 years ago, a good friend of mine. And I got there and just fell in love, looked around in awe. And I was like, wow, this is what I want to do the rest of my life. So I immediately kind of took a pretty big demotion from director to analyst at the time, and have just loved the journey throughout cyber that's landed me at Grand Canyon.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to jump right into the questions. Now, I know, because we've been working together did work together for quite a few times over the last 3 years, that you hire a ton of student workers. But when it comes to internships, does GCU do internships? I don't think they do they?
So we sort of do, if you count our own students, right? So I would call it we don't use the term internship, we call it student worker. But from a functional perspective, it really is. We also do some joint apprenticeship type program collaborative efforts with the Arizona Cyber Threat Response Alliance, or ACTRA. But a traditional open internship, to your point, is not something we have, although it is something a lot of our students seek out.
Now, I'm sure, much like I have this answer, I know you have this answer. What does a company get out of interning a student? What's the benefits or the grand scheme of things? Because I know that companies do it. So why do they do it? What's the big push for them?
There's a few levels of it, which is what's fun. It's a complex, packed up motivation. Well, I like to believe the foundation of it really is altruism. Most of us who are security leaders or who've been in it a long time care about the vision, the mission. We care about protecting our society and our way of life. We see the talent shortfall in internships and all sorts of different ways to cultivate practical skills are the answer to that. But then from a less altruistic perspective, it's the way we build our own teams and pipelines. Let's face it, if we're all competing over 10 companies competing over the same expert, and just picking them away from each other over and over again, causing the salaries to skyrocket and balloon, it really isn't good for anybody, even that person who's being fought over. Like, it creates a dysfunctional dynamic. And the answer is to actually have an appropriate balance of skilled people for the needs that we have for cyber. And I think internships, whether it's student workers, whether it's externships, internships, practical labs within degree programs, which I know you have a lot of experience building. I feel like all those things come together as the answer to how to bridge that practical skills gap.
Yeah, so one thing I've always told my students is when they get that internship opportunity, it's just as much the company seeing what type of worker you are as much as it is you seeing what kind of company you're working for. And that a company kind of gets to see where your drive is, where your ambition is, what kind of worker you are. And in some cases, they'll actually offer these interns full-time positions after they're done, if they like you, if they see that you're a good hard worker and that you know what you're talking about. On the flip side, it's kind of that try and run where, if you're not such a good worker, if you're not such a value asset to the team, they only wasted one summer on you. They don't have to pick you up again. And so it's kind of that try before you buy kind of aspect to it is how I've always seen internships, at least in my career pathway.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head, Chad. I mean, really, like the first tier of it is you have a pipeline that you've not only trained, but you've also, to your point, pre-screened. You know, and if you include people from other areas of IT that have promoted in, and most of those also being students, we haven't hired from the outside since 2017. And granted, that was a brilliant hire, so somebody we're really happy to have, but that's almost 5 years that we didn't have to go out and get into a bidding war with all these big companies, because we were able to ramp people up, pick the best of the people available at any given moment we have a need, and then the people who leave, who either we don't have a position with things, well, and that even builds a future talent pool, because of course down the road, if we ever had to go to the outside, the first people we'd pick up the phone and call are all those people that we know and love and have vetted from previous, interning passes that then left.
Yep. And so that kind of leads me into my next question, which is when it comes to hiring somebody brand new, somebody with no experience, what are you looking for in terms of a resume, in terms of a background? I mean, you're talking about hiring somebody that into cybersecurity or into IT, they don't have a strong IT or cyber background. What makes you go, I want to hire that person?
Yeah, that's a great question. So naturally, the first thing I'll set aside is the people who you're hiring because they're an expert in thing XYZ already. We all occasionally need that. And then there's no substitute. The best thing you can do for your character and your reputation is to not sort of try to like sell. But for those majority of positions where we're trying to extend an on-ramp into cyber, I would say character is the foundation of everything, character and integrity. So same deal, like if you show a character or integrity flaw in an interview, God forbid, or even in a summer internship, we're like, well, we certainly aren't going to trust that person. So if you make a mistake, if you admit it. If you don't know something you think you should know, be humble about it, admit what you don't know. Heck, those of us like you and I, Chad, have to do that all the time, right? Like those of us who are experienced have to all the time eat humble pie of the things we wished we knew that we don't. And then we have to admit what we don't know and move on. The second would be a zeal and a desire and a passion to learn. So right, nobody's going to know everything you need, even if you're experienced, usually. But if you have a desire to go hunt down the answer, and some of my favorite people on the team over the years, I think back to their interviews and they were like, I don't know the answer to that, but I can tell you I'm going to be Googling it and downloading files and testing it tonight and trying to figure it all out. Like, bingo, I want that person. And then the last is, and I know you played a big role in our Cyber Center of Excellence and Cyber Range at Grand Canyon. But people who like to home lab, people who compete in CTFs, people who compete in contests, people who go out to a range and play, people who have a home lab that they work in. And so far, the best interview that I've ever had is for somebody you know and work with as well. He showed up to the interview with a live working demo of something that related to one of my interview questions. And we actually were 15 minutes late to the next interview. It's like, no, show me this, show me that. And obviously, I was like, before we even left the interview, I'm like, you are hired, right? So if you can show up to the interview or come out of your internship, like, hey, by the way, I built a lab of everything we talked about. I have this firewall and this SIM, and I'm running this, open source antivirus, and here's my threat demo and how it all fits together. If it's a highly competitive internship and they're going to hire one of 20, be the one who did that. So yeah. Long answer to the question, but
I think we like long answers sometimes. I notice one thing that I always add, students come up to me and they say, I'm going to this interview on Saturday, or I'm going to this interview tomorrow, or whatever. What advice do you have me? And one of the number one piece of advice I always give them is, if you don't know something, It's okay to say I don't know. It is better to say I don't know than try to BS the answer, because that's not going to give me a warm fuzzy. Now I have to worry about somebody that's working with $1 million piece of equipment, right? They're going through my network, and instead of asking for help, they're going to try and figure it out themselves. I don't want them to figure it out themselves. I want them to ask for help so that if they don't know something, they don't screw something up, right? So that's always one thing that I've always instilled in students when they ask me.
Spot on.
All right, and of course, our last question, of course, before your tips, your last question I have is there one certification you look for on a resume that just goes, you know what, I'm not going to hire this person unless they have this certification? Or is there one certification that makes you go, I'm going to hire that person over this person because of that certification?
I'll be a little iconoclast here, but a degree or a cert to me never sells it, right? By itself. It does get you past HR filters, so sometimes that's useful. But again, if you're winning CTFs, if you're showing up to conferences and interacting with people, you'll get past that filter anyway. That said, some certs help. The first is go for vendor specific certs in the technology for what you want to do, right? Like if you want to work in a SOC and you see a lot of people are using Palo Alto, Splunk, various different antivirus products, NDR products, you get those certs. CoreLight and Splunk offer their foundational certs for free. You can get them. Many others do. So if you can get technology specific certs and then run that technology in a lab environment and show that you have the knowledge to back that cert up, that's worth a lot, right? That's helpful. Obviously, certs that portray expertise in a particular general subject matter area, like SANS certs, those get quite expensive. Obviously, OSCPs, really widely respected. So I would say rather than picking the cert to try to impress the hiring manager, pick the job you want and look for the certs and education that build the platform toward the knowledge, and the rest will take care of itself.
Yeah, I've always said that there's no lack of people with certifications, but there is a lack of people that actually understand the certification after done taking the test, which is a major problem in this field I've found. All right, so finally, trying to keep this short, finally, 3 tips that you would give someone looking to get in the field who's never worked in IT or cyber before. What's 3 things that you would say in prioritization? What's the 3 top things that you would tell somebody?
So the number one thing we already touched on is get practical experience. Like whether it's whatever method you prefer, CTFs are great. Are really useful. Find a way, whether it's in DigitalOcean on some Dell server you bought off eBay or in the lab at your university or school, get your hands on. And that goes to number 2, which you touched on, Chet. Don't be afraid to admit what you don't know. And actually, come forward with what you don't know, ask questions and build your learning plan based upon that. Like, hey, what I don't know about this topic. How do I learn more? And then actually take those actions to follow through. And then the third is begin to build a mind map of how it all fits together. Because we have 2 things lacking. We lack enough people with the technical knowledge, and then we lack enough people who understand how to assimilate the knowledge across domains and why it's important. Like, hey, I know this thing over here and this thing over here, but I'm not sure how they fit together. A great way to do that is take your favorite note-taking software, it doesn't matter which one, or mind mapping software, and just start to track all the breadcrumbs as you learn them. And I know you told me 3, but the 4th is don't get overwhelmed or intimidated. I was overwhelmed in the beginning. Heck, some Monday mornings I'm still overwhelmed. But if you begin building together the breadcrumbs and the components and doing the work, and putting the puzzle together. There's a frustration. There'll be moments of overly, you'll get, and you're like, oh, wow, all those yellow pieces are a sun, and those blue pieces are the ocean, and the brownish pieces are a beach. And that red isn't a flame, it's a lobster or a crab on the beach, right? So pretty soon over time, that picture begins to come together as long as you keep at it and don't give up.
All right,
There's
Mike.
there's my 4.
Well, Mike, I really appreciate your time. Next week, we'll be dealing with Dr. Heather Monty with CISP and OSCP. Please join us. Mike, thank you so much for your time and patience. I really do appreciate it. And for those that are trying to reach out to Mike, do you mind if they follow you on LinkedIn?
Yeah, absolutely. LinkedIn is good, and I'm on Twitter at Crude Solutions. I actually answer Twitter usually a little faster than LinkedIn, fewer sales messages.
Just a few, right? All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Have a great day. I appreciate your time, Mike.
All right. Thanks, Chet.